everyone, and good evening to this dry run Zoom webinar of the Town of Pembroke's 2020 Annual Town Meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss and prepare for the annual town meeting being held next Tuesday, July 28th, inside the Pembroke High School. In just a few minutes, we'll present the COVID-19 protocols put in place to ensure the safest possible environment to conduct the important business of the town. I'm Dan Terrico, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and I'm joined by my fellow members, John Brown, Jessica Bradley Rushing, and I would like to introduce our newest members, Becky Clutter and Tracy Marino. Welcome. And I want to also acknowledge Selectmen Bill Bolter and Arthur Boyle, and also Ed Thorne, all of whom have served Pembroke for many years. And at a later town meeting, when we can, we will honor them for their service to the town. I would also like to introduce our new town manager, Bill Chenard. So welcome, Bill. We're also joined by the town clerk, department heads, other elected boards, PAC TV, web participants, and viewers at home on Comcast Channel 15. And of course, we're joined by the town moderator, Steve Dodge, who will take over and run us through the town meeting process. Steve?
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate everyone being on this call, the participants, the town employees, the appointed officials, and others. I'm getting an unmute myself. There we go. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. And also those residents who are watching from home, either streaming this or watching this on television. This is the first time we ever have done this. I expect there may be a few technical glitches, or we've had a couple of dry runs, so hopefully it'll work out okay. But the reason for doing this is really twofold. Number one is we understand, we'll talk more about this in a few minutes, we understand that there may be some hesitancy on the part of some to come to town meeting. It's somewhat ironic because we always encourage participation at town meeting. We put up on the billboards, we put it over social media and the newspaper. We want people to come. We have a quorum of 150, and we want people to participate, and we want robust discussion, except now, when that is contrary to everything we are trying to do to control COVID. So I hope the folks that are watching will understand that there's been a tremendous amount of thought that's gone into this town meeting process. The discussion started really way back in April. Our first scheduled town meeting was supposed to be in May. It's been put off a number of times because we want to do it right. And we also want to make sure, needed to wait for legislative approval to do certain things like be able to start the fiscal year without a budget in place at town meeting. The legislature gave town the ability to do that. Bill Chenard, I think, will address that shortly. And we also, the legislature gave boards of selectmen the ability to reduce the quorum. And that was a measure the board took some time ago. Our quorum is 150 to start. Again, we want participation, but we couldn't expect to have a meeting to have at least 150 people there and people feel comfortable in attending. So the legislature gave the Board of Selectmen the ability to reduce the quorum to as little as 10%, which would have been 15 for us. We all were in agreement that having 15 people do a $64 million budget was probably not appropriate. So this Board of Selectmen voted to reduce the quorum to 25%. So I think that's 38 people. I suspect we'll get at least 38 people at the town meeting next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. So there was a lot of planning put into this. Selectmen also, I think, very wisely decided to reduce the number of articles in the warrant just to do absolutely necessary articles. It was determined that we did have to have a town meeting. Some towns are just going by on a 1/12 budget for a number of reasons, again, which I'm sure Bill will address. We came to the conclusion that we had to do certain things. So the articles that are on the warrant are just the absolutely necessary articles to get the town rolling. There will be other town meetings later this calendar or fiscal year. We're not sure what they're going to look like, but for sure, those articles, the bylaw articles, the community center articles, other articles that were on the original warrant but have been pulled off, will be addressed at a subsequent special town meeting later this year. So again, the articles on this warrant that we're going to discuss tonight for next Tuesday's meeting are only those that are considered absolutely necessary. And again, there's been a lot of planning put into this. Unfortunately, and I'll use this kind of informal meeting as a little bit of a soapbox, we have Pembroke News, we have PAC TV, we have some other social media forums. We have no newspaper anymore for all intents and purposes. I think the Pembroke Mariner and Reporter has set a record for the number of weeks where they haven't covered any selectmen's meeting or any action that's been taken at town meeting with regard to the town meeting. It's action at selectmen's meeting that's been taken with regard to the town meeting, unless I might have missed an issue. And that's unfortunate. I hope they're covering this tonight. I hope they cover our town meeting. But I've had a lot of people come to me and say, what's going on? I'm sure the members of the board have as well. What's happening? What's happening? We don't know. Well, the reason for this meeting is to let you know what's going on, to give you the opportunity to ask questions of all the folks that are participating. So if you don't feel comfortable going to the town meeting next week, you feel at least more comfortable that your questions will be answered. And also, this may save some time at the meeting next week. We don't want to rush things through. We're going to give people the ability to discuss and ask questions and amend if necessary, but we do want to make this meeting as short as possible. So we're going to talk a little bit about the protocols. PAC TV and Selectman John Brown did kind of a dry run walkthrough a couple of days ago. It's a short 4-minute video that I think will be very informative, that will help the voters understand how logistically this town meeting is going to work. It will be at the high school. It will be indoors, but it's going to look in some respects very different from meetings we've had in the past. So if we could have that now, and then we'll come back and get back to the agenda.
Before you enter the building tonight for town meeting, you're going to have an infrared temperature check plus a quick questionnaire from our public health officials. After your pre-screening is happening, follow the green to yellow tape all the way around the pole here so you can actually check into your precinct. And everything is socially distanced 6 feet apart. So precinct 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Once you're checked in and that's all taken care of, you have your ushers that will be seating you in your assigned seat. So make sure before you sit, if you haven't used the restroom already, we have restrooms on the other side of this facility, but as soon as you're seated, we ask you not to leave your seat. After you check in, your usher will take you to your assigned seats, which are marked off all by blue tape, as you can see. Now, these boom mics that we have here is to make sure that we can socially distance, but also speak upon articles without touching the microphones. And we have blue tape here and up where the other 2 boom mics are, so make sure where you can stand to speak on an article. You'll see chairs, as I said, being marked off. Ones with singles and also 2 for couples. So anyone who's come together that lives in the same household can actually sit together, and then we have anyone who's a single basically sitting by themselves, marked off 6 feet apart for social distancing. When you come down the aisle with your usher to get your assigned seat, you'll see you have caution tape here. For social distancing, we want to make sure that each row there's a space in between each row where everyone is sitting. When you are recognized by the moderator to speak on a certain article, like I said, we have these boom mics here, which you don't have to worry about touching to speak on any article, and also blue tape where you should be standing so you can speak towards the article that is intended. And don't forget, sound can be picked up very much by these boom mics, so please be courteous and kind to the folks speaking and make sure that we're quiet. When you're looking up here, we have several different tables for those who need to be up here. Over on your far left will be the clerk. In the middle, of course, the town moderator and town council here to the right. And then these 4 tables are being set up for those who need to be up here for department heads, such as head of advisory, since they basically speak upon usually the articles being presented, board of selectmen. Unlike previous town meetings where we were sharing microphones up here for each board, each individual table that has a microphone is going to be non-shared. So usually it's going to be a chairman of the select committee. The other boards, such as myself, since I'm going to have Mr. Trabucco up here as the head of my board, I'll be within the audience. And if I need to speak to an article or an issue, I'll head to the microphone here and the boom mics. Now, as you see throughout the auditorium, you'll see the seats are marked off from the monitor's point of view. And where if you have to speak upon an article, you'll be raising your hand for the moderator to allow you to speak. You see the doors that are open now. We want to make sure that we have maximum ventilation all the way through the auditorium for your safety. Here we are in the cafeteria for overflow when the auditorium's full after you get your assigned seat. In the cafeteria, you're going to be able to see and hear town meeting with these monitors above in the cafeteria, and with the seats more than actually 6 feet apart for social distancing. On this side, we have folks who cannot physically wear a mask. So we have the doors over here for them to come into a separate entrance, but also another monitor for them to see and hear town meeting.
So a couple of things, and we'll get into more details in a moment. I ask everyone to arrive. The doors will open at 6. We will start promptly at 7 o'clock because we want to expose people as little as possible. So we will, unless there's a big log jam at the beginning because of some processing problem, which I don't expect, we'll have plenty of staff on hand. We are going to start right at 7. So I ask you to get there early. I just wanted to turn it over quickly to Lisa Cullity, who is the health agent, or either the chiefs from PEMA, if they want to add anything about protocols for the meeting. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the conduct of the meeting will take place. But is there anything that Lisa, you or the chiefs want to add at all? Nope. Okay. I do want to tell everyone that on the town website is a fairly detailed explanation of how the meeting will be held, the protocols. It's a great reference. It'll also be handed out at the meeting. I do want to take an opportunity to thank PEMA, the Pembroke Emergency Management Agency, which includes, among others, the health agent Lisa Culley, the acting fire chief Ken McCormick, the police chief Rick Wall. They've done dry runs upon dry runs. They've visited other towns. They've been to the high school. They've done some research. They've talked to a lot of people. They developed a really good plan to make this meeting as safe as possible. Get the question all the time, why didn't we have this outside? And there is a number of reasons for that. A number of towns have had it outside. First of all, as we got later in the summer, there's EEE, which is a threat. There just wasn't a good venue to do it. And there's always the weather. That's a factor. So we had to take a number of things into consideration. There was some talk about perhaps piggybacking on the high school graduation. It just logistically would have been impossible. And again, weather, EEE, big factors. So we decided the safest place is to have it inside. So let me just talk very briefly about the conduct of the meeting. The meeting, other than physically distancing, won't look much different than a regular town meeting, or I should say won't be conducted differently than a regular town meeting. Again, masks, masks, and masks. Everyone will have to wear masks. If you want to speak, PAC TV is providing some 3-ply masks that are a little easier to speak through, but even if you're speaking at the microphone, you have to wear a mask. As John Brown mentioned in the video, there'll be boom mics, which are mics that be hanging above, 2 out front, 1 in the back. So you won't have to touch anything mics. They won't touch any mics. They won't have to be sterilized afterwards. And if you want to speak to be recognized, you'll have to raise your hand and approach one of the mics in the front, or if you're sitting at the back of the auditorium, the one in the back. If anyone wants to speak in the cafeteria, there'll be a deputy moderator there, Steve Curley, who I think everyone knows, longtime chairman and member of advisory committee. Steve is very aware of our town meeting protocol and town meeting procedures, parliamentary procedures. He and I will be able to communicate privately, and he will let me know if someone wants to speak, or if there's a vote that has to be counted in the cafeteria, he'll let me know the results of that vote. So he will be watching things over in the cafeteria. And again, boom mics, everything will be done by raise of hand. You can't shut out Mr. Moderator. You can't shut out a second. So I've enlisted the clerk and assistant town clerk to help me in making sure I don't want to miss anyone. So you'll have to raise your hand to be recognized in order to second. If you want to hold something, if you have a point of parliamentary procedure, it'll all be done by raise of hand, by hand raising. I won't go into details with it tonight, but the selectmen have established a consent agenda, which means a number of articles, I think we're up to 5 of 6 of the articles, that are absolutely routine, non-controversial, can be done in one motion. Now, that's up to the meeting. If the meeting wants to pull an item out of the consent agenda, they can do that. We've done this in the past, but so almost half of the articles, a little less than half, can be done with one motion. Again, those are just non-controversial articles.
Hey, Steve, this is Dan.
Sure.
Just before you get into the nuts and bolts of the articles, could you remind the folks here, or maybe if you just give them the time now, I'll remind them. So all the folks that are attending here on this webinar, if you're on mute, so if you want to participate, there's chat, Q&A, and you could raise your hand as you would do it in any other webinar. So for the people that are here on screen and the attendees, if you have a question, you can raise your hand or use the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen. So if you just have a question that you want to type, just chat it to us. Either myself or Sabrina will ask the question to Steve. If you want to have a dialogue or a discussion or a fuller question, let us know that, and we'll unmute you and you can participate. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks for reminding me about that, because that's the whole point of this, is to allow for audience participation. 2 last points. There will be warrants available to be handed out at the meeting, but we ask you, for obvious reasons, if you can print your own warrant and bring it with you and dispose of it yourself, that's a better way to handle it. They have been posted for a while now on the town website, and you can download it and print that out. Also, we don't want to rush this meeting. We don't want to expose people as much as possible, but the meeting would quite frankly be a sham if we were either perceived or try to ram things through. So like every other meeting, if people have discussions, if they have questions, if they want to amend something, you certainly can do that. But I will ask that you speak concisely, that you stick to the topic and try to not repeat things so we can move this along as quickly as possible. So with that, we will go, as I think most people know from Pembroke, we have the lottery system. So we draw things out of a little hat, and they come up random, with exception of the first couple articles, the budget and the wage and personnel scale. But everything else is done by lottery. We won't do that tonight. We'll just go 1 through 15. And so we'll start at Article 1. And I will, first article is a budget transfer item. And I'm going to turn the video and microphone over to Mike Buckley, who is our town accountant, to just discuss about question 1. And again, if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand, type them in, and we'll answer them as we go along. Oh, can't hear you, Mike. Still can't hear you. And you're coming through as muted, so I don't know if that's on your end or on our end. There we go.
Okay, how's that?
Good.
Okay, thank you. So moving right along, Article 1, I have 4 items. And the first would be a transfer from the capital fund of $24,824 for a fuel system at the Department of Public Works. The second would be $52,298, also from the capital fund, to complete the roof and the overhead door and the damage to the DPW barn, electrical damage as well. $50,000 from the capital fund for an asphalt hot box so we can fix potholes in town. The device we have now is no longer usable, and we're getting a lot of complaints about that. And the last item would be $102,500 from water surplus to continue the testing on the Swanbrook property, which is between Pleasant and Washington Street, where our water division of the DPW is looking to put a well in there in the future.
Thanks, Mike. Are there any questions at all? And I've asked the Assistant Town Manager, Sabrina Chilcott, and Dan to just speak up and flag me, since I'm not good at multitasking, if there are any questions.
But Steve, we are monitoring them. We do not have a question or a raised hand at this moment.
Great.
We will jump in and say question to you so that you will acknowledge us.
Great. And this is very informal, so if we miss you or you think of something further on in the meeting you want to ask about a previous article, feel free to do that. Number 2 is a routine article, but it's important, and I'll ask Bill Chenard, and Bill, I guess is your official introduction on other than the Selectmen's meeting. Welcome to Pembroke, and Article 2 traditionally has been the wage and classification scale. Or plan, I should say.
Yes, I hope everyone can hear me now that we're unmuted. So the wage and classification plan is basically the same article that we do every year with changes to our classification. We have some changes in the classification as a result of collective bargaining contracts and small other changes over other contracting. So it's a pretty typical article. This year, obviously, we'll be going through that in some detail at town meeting. They're in the packet as Appendix A. I would encourage everyone to take a look at Appendix A of the packet. I would also encourage everybody, as the moderator has previously said, go to the town's webpage. It's right there on the front page of our website. Download, take a look at it, even if you download it to an electronic device so you have that with you. And take a look at the appendix, and it's pretty clear on where those changes are. If anybody has any questions, we can certainly answer them.
Thank you, Bill. Before we get to the budget, we have a question, I think, from school committee member Susie Scholl. Is that correct? About back to the protocols at town meeting?
Steve, so your question is, as part of raising, let's see if I can find it. As part of, at the meeting, as part of raising your hands, asking the question, how will you have a person approach the boom mic without having to climb over others in the same seating aisle, etc.?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's something we talked about. And quite frankly, what we said in the protocols that are written, that if you know you're going to address something, ask the ushers to sit you at the end so you don't have to clear out. There won't be a lot of people in each aisle, so it won't be like there'll be a whole aisle of people that have to move out to get you there to the microphone. But it's going to be a little bit cumbersome, but we'll just have to wait. And if you raise your hand and you have a question, and there are people between you and the aisle, then you're going to have to ask them to move. I hope that addresses the question. All right, so Article 3 is the budget, $64 million budget. And so once again, Bill, the floor is yours. And I will just say that if people who are watching have questions about individual line items, we do have the budget line items available. We weren't going to show them all because people would get a little dizzy with all the figures. But if you have a specific question about a line item, we do have the ability to show that so you can see it. I still have see you as muted, Bill.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, so I want to take a moment and just address how we got here and actually how the town is functioning in fiscal year 21 without a budget. Because previously to recent changes by the legislature and the governor, we couldn't do that. We would have to have had a budget in place beginning on July 1 to continue and pay any of our bills or our staff. Earlier this year, Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31, which is the law that requires us to have a budget in place and appropriated by our legislative body, which is town meeting in the case of the town of Pembroke, was amended by Section 5 of Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020. And basically what it did was it allowed cities and towns that were unable to take legislative action to establish what was called a 1/12 budget. Now, it wasn't truly a taking your annual budget and dividing it by 12. It was allocating what was required for the month of July and subsequent months if you needed to be there. And then have your Board of Selectmen approve that. We did. We gave the detail of every department line item that was required, explanation for that. The board voted it. We submitted it to the Department of Revenue, and the Division of Local Services approved our budget. So we're now operating on a 1/12 budget. So we're legal within the confines of the statute. We can't do that forever. I mean, we could continue it month to month if we absolutely had to. But the scary part of that is if the governor, once the governor ends the state of emergency, we would have only had 30 days to approve a budget or be operating illegally. So it is best that we move forward with a budget. Our budget is somewhat constrained based upon our revenue projections, which are still not 100% known. We're still working through that. I think we'll be okay. We obviously closed fiscal 20 in the green, and looking forward to fiscal 21. I have had contact with Josh Cutler, who is working very hard on our behalf with the legislature, and the legislature did pass a temporary budget, which will continue through into FY21 and assist cities and towns. We're still waiting for the final budget, which will be some time. Local aid projections are right now at level funded from FY20. We did get our Chapter 90 allocation. For those of you who don't know what Chapter 90 is, it's our street paving allocation that was also level funded at $200 million statewide. So those are good things, very good things, and I'm very happy that the legislature was able to do that. Moving forward, we'll be adjusting our projected revenue stream as more information becomes available with meals tax and excise tax and local receipts and with state aid projections. So as the moderator said previously, we will have, given the COVID restrictions, another town meeting where we can make budget adjustments and hopefully add to these budgets. Having said that, we're talking now about Article 3. I'll get on to Article 3. Article 3 is basically the town, except where we have contractual obligations or we know certain factors that will require us to spend more money. Healthcare is going up. The Mayflower Group did raise nominally the cost of healthcare. The Plymouth County assessment is going up. We have to pay that. And we have certain contractual obligations that we have to pay. We took a very hard look at all of our budgets. It's somewhat troubling for me that we've had to make some cuts. We're trying to eliminate as many layoffs as possible. However, in the absence of additional revenue, we will likely have layoffs on the town side. It's not a good thing. However, we're still evaluating that. So the request this year at the first town meeting is for $64,022,153,000 and $153. And we hope that folks will pass that. If you want to look at the detail, it is available again front page of the town's website. The entire budget by department is there.
Bill, I want to give everyone a chance to weigh in and ask questions if they have any. Could you just maybe briefly address the school budget, since that's I think, more than 50% of our actual budget and what's happening on the school side?
Yep. So certainly, the school budget we did take a look at FY20. I've spoken with the superintendent. It is a concern of mine. The schools are critical to the community, and it's absolutely more than 50% of our budget. We did increase approximately 200,000 over FY20. We knew there were going to be additional costs for the school as a result of COVID. We are submitting those to the CARES Act in Plymouth County, but there will be things that we're going to need to fund. So at this time, the school budget is 200,000 greater than last year, approximately just under 200,000 greater than FY20. And what we'll be doing is the school's budget is on our priority list. We've created a priority list that we're working through, and it's still adjusting those things if additional revenue becomes available that we're going to restore. And the schools is one of those that's actually very high on that list. So school budgeting is a challenge because the schools spend a lot of their budget up front to prepare for school in the fall. All of their major in-depth cleaning in schools on an annual basis. Some of the painting and some of the upgrades happen in the summer months. So it is a challenging time for schools when you have basically a budget freeze or a budget constraint and don't have that operating budget. So we did indeed do whatever we could within the 112 budget, and we're adding the 200,000 at this time and hoping that we'll be able to add additional funding in the future.
Thanks, Bill. We also have the school superintendent, Erin Obey, with us. And Erin, feel free to add anything if you wish to.
Sure. So similar to what Bill said, we did go through a series of layoffs on our end in order to get to that number. Even though it's about 200,000 more than our current budget, we're still operating with about 14 less staff moving forward. So I know that Bill mentioned that the schools are a priority for him, and we've talked about what a restoration could look like in the timeline for that. So we are hopeful that that becomes a reality as we move closer to the start of school.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Or I also want to give advisory a chance to weigh in. As everybody knows, advisory is charged with making a recommendation on every single article. They put a lot of deliberation into their work that really starts in the fall. I know we have several members of advisory committee on with us. My understanding is that on all of the money articles, advisory and the board and town manager in agreement. Is that correct? It is correct. So if anyone wants to, thanks. If anyone wants to weigh in from advisory, please feel free to do so. Let's move on to Article 4, which is one of the articles that we've decided to put on the consent agenda, which means it's non-controversial. Again, with any of these articles, it's up to the meeting to decide whether they want to do that. And they're free to ask questions and hold those items if they want. But Article 4, Bill, is a relatively routine article that essentially establishes the water department's budget, correct?
That's correct. In Article 4 is the water. It operates as an enterprise fund, so it must be funded separate from the general fund. We do that. This year's request is for $2,251,957, and we're going to be splitting that a little bit. We tried to keep water rates low. No, excuse me, that's on the trash side. So the water rates did increase as a result of some capital projects. So it's important that we recognize that. So again, the FY21 request for the Water Enterprise Fund is $2,251,957, and that detail is also on the website under the budget items under the water section.
Bill, this is Dan. Could you back up to the school for a second? We had a question that came in a little later.
Sure.
It's either for you or Erin Obey, but I have you on the line, so let's ask you. If we have a hybrid school opening, will the budget cover that mode of operation?
So
hybrid meaning distance learning and physical on-site learning.
So it will initially, but we will be looking at some additional costs. There are additional costs that are going to be associated with them based upon what we've looked at, and I'll ask the superintendent to weigh in also. But no matter what methodology you have, it's going to be a challenge, and there are going to be additional costs related to COVID-19 for the schools. it's just the nature of the beast. It's very difficult to do the social distancing piece within a school environment. I know the schools have worked diligently on a plan to get to that point. Anybody who's watched some of the school committee meetings, you can see some of the discussion points on that. It is a challenge. Initially, we will have, based on the school budget, enough funding, but we will likely have to augment that during the fiscal year if we don't get enough funds through the CARES Act to cover those costs.
Superintendent, did you want to weigh in at all? There you go.
She's
Perfect.
unmuted now.
So, yep. Thank you. I think similar again to what Bill said, we are planning within the confines of our budget. So our hybrid models that we're working on kind of hinge on using the staff that we have now and thinking about the costs associated with COVID-19 and the various models for school, using the CARES funds to pick up some of the supplies and materials and cleaning products that are needed to get us up to the sanitation standards. But as far as staffing, we're working within the confines of our existing operating budget.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions, we'll move on to Article 5, which is our solid waste budget. And once again, Bill Chenard.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. So basically, this request this year is for $2,125,573, and that's actually a split request between $2,025,573 from solid waste revenue. And what we did was, in an effort, because there was a large increase to the waste and recycling fee this year, we did take $100,000 from solid waste surplus to offset that rate. That isn't something we'll be able to sustain long term. We are fortunate that we're able to do that this year to help keep the rate as low as we could. I want to take a moment to talk about sanitation while I have the mic. You're going to hear me say this over and over. People are going to get sick of hearing me say it. But one of the things and one of the reasons that our recycling cost is increasing so high, and we all know about the China sword issue with them not taking our paper products and other recycling materials. But in the town of Pembroke, our recycling contamination rate is 25.9%. The average nationwide is 13 to 17%. That cost to the town is substantial and forces us to pay more for our recycling than we need to. We actually have been working with our recycling companies, and I'm going to be meeting in the near future with the recycling committee. We're going to roll out a plan, information to our residents that we don't put bowling balls in our recycling. We don't put plastic bags in our recycling. We don't pack our recycling in plastic bags and then throw them in a recycling container. If we can get that percentage down, it's a huge savings, and we could actually potentially reduce the cost of our trash fee. So anyway, I know we're talking budgets tonight, but thank you for allowing me the public service message. I think it's important that everybody hear that. Again, the total budget request for solid waste, $2,125,573.
Thanks, Bill. Let me just follow up on that. So when you say recycling contamination, it's basically things in recycling, in our recycling bin, the black covered one, that shouldn't be in there, that forces the recycling costs up. Is that correct?
That's correct. So what happens is the recycling materials are materials that our recycling company, the MRF, so to speak, that takes and separates and then markets on our behalf. And there's actually a share to the community on that market. When there's 25.9% contamination, there's always going to be contamination. It's always something that's out there. But 25.9% is very, very high. If we just throw those items in our trash, there's no extra cost to put it in your trash bin. Keep it out of recycling, and the town will save a substantial amount of money because we pay extra for waste. They have to sort it and get it out of that recycling stream, and we don't want that.
Great. Good public service announcement. We'll move on to Article 6. We have two items that the selectmen and the DPW have determined that are capital budget requests. And I believe we have Jean Fullmine, who is our longtime DPW director, to talk about those two requests. One has to do with Route 36 tie-ins, and the other is the all-important water filtration plant upgrade. Hi, Jean. Oop, okay. I think you're still muted, so we'll give you a moment to be unmuted from central control. All right, not yet. For those of PAC TV, okay, there you go. Great.
Hi, Steve.
Yes, you're on, Gene. Thank you.
So our request for Route 36 water main tie-ins is in our master plan, and it's tying all the services from roughly Elliott Ave to 27 over to the 16-inch main from the existing 8, and then the side streets will be an 18x6 tap tying in all the side streets. And this is being bumped up because our Mass DOT TIP project through OCPC and Mass DOT is bumped up. So October 21, they're going to be looking to put that road project out to bid. So we've got to get this done before then. And the hope is to get it out to bid this winter for the next spring construction. And it's 15 to 16 weeks of construction.
And water filtration?
And as a result of the water filtration, when the contractor got the filters drained, all 6 of them, the filter material out and everything, we had the reps from each company come in and inspect the interior units. As expected, everything internally was just about junk and needed to be replaced. Luckily, we had enough money in our contingencies where I could shift them over to the newest 3 filters so we could get that filtration plant back online to be able to produce 1 million gallons a day for this time of year. And now I need this $500,000 transfer to take care of the original 3 filters because they were double the price of what needed to be done on the newest ones.
And Gene, was this work one of the reasons why we had the more strict water ban back a month and a half ago?
Only because the filtration plant project wasn't done and able to go online earlier. And when the weather changed, we lost the tanks, and that's what produced that. But we weren't the only ones. When the weather quickly changed, some of the surrounding towns had the same issue with being able to recoup in their reservoirs and clear wells.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to Article 7, and I'll queue up Lisa Cullity, who is not only our health agent, but she is the chairman of the Community Preservation Committee. We routinely have CPC articles on our warrant. Some are kind of routine articles because statutes require that a certain amount of money be put aside for certain expenses from CPC. And then there's other articles, and they'll be further down, that actually allocate money for specific projects, which Lisa will talk about. So Article 7, we put on the consent agenda because it really is not controversial. It's more routine. And I'll turn it over to Lisa if she's on, and she can explain that article.
The article just creates the opportunity to contribute to CPC. It's the article that creates CPC and adds it into the budget. One important note that comes off often with CPC is people believe that if we don't use CPC funding, that's allowed to be reverted to the general fund. So I would just remind the town meeting audience through the moderator that that's not a possibility. CPC money is earmarked. It is earmarked for CPC qualified projects, and that no, not spending that money on CPC projects would not make revenue available to go back to the general fund.
Great, thank you, Lisa. We'll get back to you with subsequent CPC articles in just a few minutes. Article 8 is another one that's really a routine article. We do it every year. It sets the revolving funds for different expenditures for different programs in town. And once again, I'll turn it back to Town Manager Bill Chinard.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. So this is also another routine article, Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E and 1/2. I always laugh when I say that because you don't see many statutes that have that 1/2 after them, but the legislature, in this case, put it there. We're required every year to set that spending limit for these funds so that we have appropriate numbers for our departments. They're listed there. Also on the website front page if someone wants to download and take a look at that.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to keep you on board for the Article 9, perhaps you and Mike Buckley as well. the funding for the septic betterment program. Article 9.
Sure, I'm happy to take this one. And Mike can weigh in if he wants also. This is a really good program that the Commonwealth has put in place for local boards of health. It allows boards of health through a low interest loan program, which is 100% recoupable to the town, to go out and deal with failed Title V. It's good for the environment. It helps our residents who are struggling to pay that. Basically, what it does is it gives them that low interest loan that I mentioned before. They can go out and get their Title V work done and then pay it back with nominal interest to the community over time. It's a betterment program that's added to their annual taxes, but in the form of a loan. Again, very good for the environment and a tremendous help to the residents and revenue neutral for the town.
Article 10, again, I don't want to skip over questions. We can go back to them if people have any questions, and shout them out, Bill or Sabrina, if people do, and feel free to weigh in and ask questions. But we'll move to Article 10, which is entering into a memorandum of understanding regarding transportation school reimbursement. And either Bill or the superintendent, whoever wants to take this one.
I'm happy to, or I'm happy to allow the superintendent to. This again, another good program for busing for children that are in the foster care transportation program, where the town can submit for reimbursement through an MOU for those funds. I know where I came from in Natick, we instituted this program, and it was a definite positive to the revenue stream. So I would encourage everyone to vote it. This just authorizes the superintendent, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, to enter into that with the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families and the Executive Office of Health and Human Services. So, and of course, DESE. Terrific program, strong support for that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll keep you on for Article 11, which is the collective bargaining agreement between the town and the Pembroke Police Union.
So again, this actually happened before my time, but it would have happened with me if it didn't happen before then. So this is to fund the collective bargaining agreement that the town has entered into with the police. Again, a typical thing. You're going to see more of these as we move forward. We just completed negotiations with the fire department and have done that. So as soon as advisory has an opportunity to review that, we'll be bringing that forward at a future town meeting. And we are negotiating with our other unions. In fact, I'm negotiating with 2 of them tomorrow. So these are regular occurrences, and we would request that approval of that of this as written for Article 11 with between the town and the Pembroke Police.
Thank you, Bill. Article 12 is a routine article. I'm told it goes back to the bygone days when committees would actually do verbal reports on the town meeting floor. So even though we don't do that anymore, we give people the opportunity to do it if they want to. But all the reports from the individual committees, both appointed and elected, are in the town report, the annual town report, which I'm told will be available at town meeting. It's also available at town hall. And so this is a routine article that is on the warrant every year. There's never any discussion. There's no boards that normally want to make a verbal report, but it's on there, and that'll be part of the consent agenda. Back to Lisa Cullity, if we can cue Lisa up for Article 13, and there's actually 4 different parts to Article 14, and as we always do, we take each recommendation as kind of a separate article. So it's one article with kind of 4 subsets, so we'll be taking 4 motions. And these are the articles that expend actual CPC money for certain projects. So Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Moderator. So just to touch back on what we touched on a minute ago through you to town meeting, Mr. Moderator, the Community Preservation Act group, the committee, is not responsible for necessarily saying we promote or don't promote any particular article. The purpose of the CPC committee is to, in fact, determine if an article qualifies, if it is appropriate, and if it can be funded. So in the situation of these 4 articles, that's true of all of them. They can all be funded. They are all qualified. And in this particular round of funding, it's important to note that we did not have enough funding available for all the petition articles that were submitted to CPC this round. This was the first round that occurred. So one of the reasons that these 4 articles are moved forward and some other articles were not moved forward is all 4 of these articles have other grant funding opportunity, whether through the state or through other private organizations associated with them. So I suggest the voters listen carefully to those articles. And Mr. Moderator, I don't know if you wanted to touch on each one individually, or what were your thoughts tonight?
I think that'd be good if you could just briefly each one.
Certainly. The first one is for the town to appropriate $80,000 out of the undesignated reserve fund, and that's going to be used in conjunction with the town manager's office for recreational purposes for the preservation of Town Landing Beach and guardhouse for the purposes of making it compliant with the ADA. This particular $80,000 allotment has a $131,000 state grant attached to it. This is part of the matching funds that was put forward by the town to be matched with that ADA grant for improvements at Town Landing. So if this article were not favorably acted upon, we would stand the likelihood that we would lose those additional funds. The second article, recommendation B, is to move that the town appropriate the sum of $30,000 from the Community Preservation Undesignated Reserve Fund to be used by the town manager for recreational purposes and preservation and rehabilitation of the Matakeesit Street Playground by constructing and installing Americans with Disability Act accessible surfacing and new playground equipment. So this is, again, in conjunction with another grant funding opportunity. I apologize that I don't know the exact dollar amount of that grant funding opportunity that is also going to work on the playground, but this $30,000 is, again, to make this playground accessible to all residents, especially those that might have some mobility issues.
Question.
Sir.
We have a question in from one of the panelists regarding 13B. The question
Yes.
is, did the grant money that is being matched with CPC come from the Mass Office of Disabilities? And if so, why isn't it part of the 5-year plan?
That I can't answer off the top of my head. We had a grant writing specialist that was working on that particular project. I personally did not work on that aspect of the project. That would be a question for them. I can only answer on the CPC portion, and I know the $30,000 being allocated through CPC is specifically for accessibility, but it is nowhere near the full value of the project that is planned at that site.
Question again, if you could backtrack on 13A. Have some of the landing accessibility improvements been started?
We had started moving forward with the project, but unfortunately, due to COVID, we were not able to. This project was actually slated to have been completed by June 30th under the original application deadline. Because of COVID and other constraints, the state did allow, I believe, a 1-year extension on the project. Again, one would have to talk to the grant writer applicant, but I'm pretty sure it's a 1-year extension. Obviously, our town meeting isn't happening until after that. So my understanding is we have until June 30th of next year to complete the project.
Yes, and Lisa, thank you very
Yes,
much. So both of those questions, if Bill Chenard could touch on them, and Bill, I'll remind you what the questions were. Regarding 13B, that article, why isn't that part of the 5-year plan? And with 13A, Lisa touched on it, but 13B, if you could just touch on why wasn't that part of the 5-year plan? And it may have been, but that's the question.
Yeah, so this actually occurred before my time, and unfortunately, I don't have that answer, but I will get an answer for the resident that's asking. I think it's important that we note that the Matakeesit project obviously is an important project to the town, and because we did get grant funding, and the grant funding is $25,000. Obviously the Town Landing project is important also. Both projects are started, not the construction phase, but the planning phase, the bidding phase. We have much of that in place, but not 100%. But we are aggressively working toward assuming that these funds are appropriated at town meeting, doing this work in the first part of September once the town landing closes, so that the projects are tied together because the port in place rubber safety under the playground is one contract. So we want to do that back to back. And then we have the plans for the building at town landing, and we'll be working through that. So I will get an answer to whether it's tied to the 5-year plan or not. Based on my knowledge of the plan, I don't believe the Matakeesit Street playground was high on that, but it may be tied to where we could use the grant money. So I will explore that a little further and get some more information for the resident.
Thank you. And before we move on, and allow you to finish recommendation C, Lisa, we did have Jessica Rushing has a help for us in the Matakeesit Street playground question. Jessica, I believe you've been unmuted from my end. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, I have been unmuted. The Matakeesit Street Playground was not originally part of any of the ADA planning. The money that we received was, our representative, Josh Cutler, was able to get money allocated for the town of Pembroke for the Matakeesit Street ball fields that was initially intended to be used to do some upgrades, I believe, to the fields and the lights. However, the amount of money that was allocated was not, was nowhere near enough what we would have needed to upgrade the lights. So instead, we sort of looked for other ways that we could do upgrades to that field complex within the amount of money that had been allocated. It was about $25,000, and that we determined would be enough to tie in with some of the other improvements that were being made with the ADA surfacing. So it was not originally related to any of the ADA projects, but in order to sort of do the matching funds with CPC and use the state money that we had received, that was a project that we could complete with the money that we had available and tie into the other ADA projects in town. So it was originally not part of the 5-year plan at all.
Thank you, Jessica.
Great. I do not have any more questions on the docket right now. So, Steve, if you would allow Lisa to continue with recommendation C, I believe she's on.
Yeah, please, Lisa.
Okay, so motion C would be to move that the town appropriate the sum of $50,000 from the Community Preservation Undesignated Reserve Fund, that said funds be used by the town manager for recreational and historic purposes for preservation and restoration of Veteran Memorial Park, Phase 1, including but not limited to site preparation, drainage, engineering, installation in support of the Americans with Disability Act accessibility pathways, and preservation of historical features. So it's kind of a broad article. It goes with other previously allocated funds for the town green project. I know those funds exceed $60,000 currently already allocated. This money would go with that, and that together would, I believe, not quite complete, but should mostly complete phase 1 of the town green project.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate. Did we do D? I'm sorry, I lost track.
No.
Okay. Yeah, we have one more, recommendation D.
Yes, sir. I was just making sure there was no questions. So recommendation D would be to move that the town appropriate the sum of $500 from the Community Preservation Undesignated Reserve Fund, that said funds be used by the Town Memorial Committee for historic preservation purposes for the replacement of Veterans Marker at Grove and Matakeesit Street. And for those that aren't familiar, there is a round medallion with a plaque set into it. Our previous veterans agent had done a great deal of work replacing some of these markers that had fallen into disrepair. This is one more of those said markers. I believe we've done 3 so far and funded them. This is a 4th or a 5th, and I apologize, I don't know the account off the top of my head, but that's what this particular project is for those that have already seen them out there.
All right, thank you, Lisa. And if folks have any questions, they can, again, raise their hand and ask it live or use the chat function to type in a question. We have 2 left. State law allows residents of a community, and in the case of, I think, of an annual town meeting, it only takes 10 residents to petition the Board of Selectmen to put an article on the warrant. The selectmen can choose either to put it on or not put it on. So the last two articles, Articles 14 and 15, are two petition articles. Article 14 would have the town spend $2,500 to fund the ARC, which is to help those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And Article 15 is a citizen petition to appropriate $5,000 to fund the South Shore Community Action Council. These are articles that I believe that have been on the warrant before. I think the petitioner for Article 15 is joining us this evening. I'm not sure whether there's anyone, and I want to give them kind of first dibs as I would at the meeting, since it's a petition article, to allow them to make the motion. These are a little bit controversial, and I'll have the town manager explain why in just a moment. But is there anyone, and I'll give them a minute to raise their hand or identify themselves, who wants to address Article 14, any of the petitioners, which is the ARC article?
Steve, I do not see any raised hands on my end.
Okay. I know Ginny Wandell is also on the line, and we can talk about why these are maybe a problem in a minute, because there's the same issue that affects both of them. But Ginny Wandell is the lead petitioner on Article 15, which is the South Shore Community Action Council article. And maybe, Ginny, you could explain, these have been on the warrant before, and explain what this funding is for. And we'll give command control a second to unmute you.
Try it now, Ginny. You're unmuted on my end. It might be on your own screen, Ginny.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Well, I guess we're saving the best for last, so I'll be the optimist. I can't speak to Article 14. Sorry, I'm not familiar with the ARC's request. I'm not sure that I remember it being at a town meeting for discussion or any appropriation. But Article 15, in a nutshell, is a request for funding for social services. So the motion is to move that the town would appropriate a sum of $5,000 to South Shore Community Action Council for services to low-income families and children, and for elder services. So the reason that this has been controversial because of the way that the funds are delivered. South Shore Community Action Council is not a charity, in my view, although the designation is that it is a 501c3. So I'm here to petition the town for the first time, although South Shore Community Action Council has been in existence for many years. President Johnson, in the early 60s, designated each state with the ability to request and govern and watch over federal funds, as well as state, utilizing state funds. And now 10% of this budget has a gap. So the town of Pembroke every year receives money in terms of services. We have over 300, almost 400 families who received services in 2019. That's about 700 individuals. So the way I see this article is that we are actually contracting for services. Those social services that we provide at South Shore Community Action Council are for, you may be familiar with Head Start. Those are federal funds that are granted. But on a one-to-one personal note, this South Shore Community Action Council has funded for fuel assistance every year to Pembroke residents, does weekly distribution of food with the Council on Aging for bagged groceries and Meals on Wheels. They guarantee reliable transportation to at least a dozen families for when they are in need of hospital care, such as like dialysis visits, and many other services. There are about 8 categories of social services that the town of Pembroke could contract for individually. Just imagine if the town of Pembroke had to contract for transportation with Uber. In this case, South Shore Community Action Council has vans and transportation. They have counselors. They provide tax help when, especially at the Council on Aging. There's a great partnership with folks who need assistance in their tax preparation. So I'm wondering if, once again, for many, many years, as we've done before, the town will agree to raise and appropriate that sum of $5,000, because actually in 2019, the town of Pembroke received $243,000 worth of services to almost 400 families. You don't know necessarily every single dollar and every person, because that's private information, but I trust this entity, South Shore Community Action Council, with the money that we are given. And I think the $5,000 request would just be a generous gift for the amazing services that we receive.
Thank you, Ginny. I know Town Council has an opinion on these 2 articles, and she's not with us tonight, but Bill Gennard, maybe you can talk a little bit about the concerns that Town Council has raised about these 2 petition articles.
Yeah, unfortunately, when Town Council reviewed the warrant this year, and it's not a surprise, I don't want to speak against either of the articles in the sense that I think both of the entities that are described in the articles are valuable to the town of Pembroke. However, it's the opinion of Town Council and the Department of Revenue that funding the 501c3 corporation in this manner is not appropriate, that we can't do it. That it would be appropriate for the town to contract with those individual organizations, but the state's anti-aid amendment prohibits us from directly giving a gift to a 501c3 corporation. So it does create a problem for us with the Department of Revenue audits and with Town Council approval of the warrant. I mean, the recommendation was that the articles are not appropriate in form.
And I believe Select Board Member Becky Coletta has a question or wants to comment. You're still muted, Becky. There we go. You're all set.
Am I also? Okay, so my question is, I know that both in Pembroke and in a town where I was on the select board before, we have funded these types of articles over a number of years. My question, and I hear what Bill is telling us with regard to the, I forget what we refer to it as, the act, but the idea that we can't simply give a gift to charity from taxpayer funds. But this organization has been around for so many years, providing, and I think we've gotten used to them providing safety net services that we as a town really don't provide. We don't have a mechanism to help people with some of these fundamental safety net services. And so my question is, could we, would it be legal for us to approve this transfer or for this budget item, and then ask the Board of Selectmen to go back and contract with the organization for some level of services related to this amount? I mean, looking at the list of services that Jenny Wandell had provided to me earlier, we look at $243,000 worth of service dollars on behalf of Pembroke residents. And just look at a small percentage of that as something that the town should be taking some responsibility for. It seems like it would not be difficult to justify budgeting $5,000 for this level of service. So my question is whether we can look at this slightly differently. If we are appropriating that amount of money, could the appropriation be contingent upon the Board of Selectmen entering into a contract for such services, thereby making the expenditure legal?
So based on my past experience with the town of Natick, that's exactly what we did in Natick. As long as we have a contract for services that are provided by the entity, it no longer becomes us giving a gift. We're actually granting funds in lieu of services received. So I'm not town council, we can ask, but based on past practice in other communities, that would be a correct means to do that as long as we make it contingent upon a contract.
Question. Steve, this is Dan. So town council was unequivocal in their advice to us to not allow Article 14 and 15 to pass at town meeting for the reasons that Bill outlined. The participants here and the public should know that the Board of Selectmen vote on what goes into the annual town meeting articles. We cannot prevent any petition article. We cannot remove any petition article. Once a petition has received a sufficient number of signatures, we are compelled to put it on the warrant, whether we agree with it or not. So I think the advice of town council should be heeded by town meeting. And I think that Article 14 and Article 15 should be voted against for the reasons that town council has outlaid and Bill has mentioned them here tonight. But it should be known that both of these entities provide tremendous services real services to the town of Pembroke. This is not a vote against these councils, Social Community Action Council, or the Arc of the South Shore. It's not a vote against them as an entity because they are very helpful. The way to do it, as Bill mentioned and Becky asked about, was to contract with the town. And that would be a discussion at a Board of Selectmen's meeting that we would have further. It's outside of the scope of the town meeting. But I would just urge everyone to understand what town council has said to us regarding these, and also note that I intend on voting against these as a member of town meeting and as a Board of Selectmen member at town meeting because of town council's advice, not because these entities aren't worth it. They are. I want to stress that they do so much work, and Ginny outlaid that, and many of us here know Ginny very well, and she's a person to be trusted and listened to when it comes to these services that they provide. So nothing against these two entities, only because of legalities.
So could I just jump in for 1 second?
Sure, go right ahead.
So thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, Dan, for your kind words. Absolutely, I thank you for trusting me, but the trust is not just in me, it's in the South Shore Community Action Council. So I'm actually happy to be in this conversation because this entity has been in existence for probably 58 years. And I only came to the board about a year and a half ago. But I had come to town meeting and voted, understanding that these social services were not provided by the town of Pembroke, and that somehow or other, the mechanism for quote unquote a contribution was the distribution of funds through contracted service. So, Dan, I hear what you're saying. If your vote is nothing else, let it be a vote of confidence. And then I would absolutely ask town council, ask Mike Buckley, ask, Kathleen, however the funding is actually worked out and paid out, of course, should be legal. But I would ask then that this is a vote of confidence. And the town will be using its voice, even if there are 38 people who can vote on this, as $5,000 from our $64,000 budget. Again, $243,000 worth of services provided from South Shore Community Action Council with an ask of $5,000. I think we can figure out how to do it legally and have it funded. That's all I need to say.
We have a question. Let's see. It's to you, Ginny, so while you're there. Hi, Ginny, since your group provided lots of data in the annual town report, can you not in the future create a proactive contract request with the town? Becky beat me to it. That was the first part of the question.
Yes.
The second part is, Ginny, are you not asking for funds after service delivery? Can we not make a proactive line item process in a future meeting? So we did. So just if I could touch on that first, Jenny, I believe it was South Shore Community Action or an entity like it would petition every town meeting for funds in the $5,000 range. So it kept going through. So we said, why petition it? We'll just put it in a line item in the budget. And what happened was we put it in a line item in the budget, and then they petitioned as well to get 2 articles, a line item in the budget.
That was women's shelter funding for domestic
That's what it
violence.
was. You're right.
And that was not South Shore Community Action Council, and there was no double dipping going on.
Oh yeah, it wasn't double dipping for money. They just wanted to make sure that they had the history of it that I remember is they wanted to make sure that if the line item was struck out, they would have that petition article. And I think it was the Department of Revenue that no longer allowed us to put it on as a budget line item to begin with. So just to reiterate the question that was asked, Ginny, you're not asking for funds after service delivery. Can we make a proactive line item process at a future meeting? So if you could just touch on that yourself, Ginny.
We have a history of an ask for the $5,000. I don't know how we would split up the services prior to the actions, but I'm not the brilliant mathematician who can tell you what's appropriate at which point in time in the budget, whether it's before or after. I don't know if we can collect funds before the services are delivered. So if it's a fee for service after delivery and it works in the right town budget timeline, as long as it's within the current fiscal year, you guys will tell us how you want this to work. We're the Mutual Admiration Society. We are very good at partnering. So I don't see this as something that's insurmountable. I think it just needs to be funded appropriately. And of course, we want to do it the legal way.
Becky, did you want to add something? One more thing, Becky Coletta?
If I could, am I unmuted?
No, you're good.
So 2 things. One is more of a point of order for the moderator, and that is whether or not we are able to amend a citizen petition on town meeting floor to add something such as, subject to development of a contract and approval of a contract between the Board of Selectmen and this organization. And my second question, so that then I can just mute myself again, is my understanding is that if we don't fund it at a town meeting and have a budget number for it, we could not later, as a Board of Selectmen, approve a contract without funding. So it seems to me that we would need to fund it here subject to the Board of Selectmen reaching a contract later. And then if we reach a contract, do we spend it? If we don't reach a contract, then it goes back into the general fund. So that's more of a point of order for the moderator and possibly for the town manager.
But I'll just say I can't. The first part, and again, I'd really want to defer to town council, but my sense is an amendment like that would be within the scope of the article. I don't think there are any real constraints in a petition article. The petition part of it is just getting it on the warrant. So my sense is that would be certainly a permissible amendment. But again, I'd want to have town council look at it first. The second part of the question obviously is beyond my scope. I will say that the South Shore Community Action Council article does say, or take any other action relative to there too. So that kind of opens the door a little bit for amendment. But again, the second part of your question, I don't know if Bill can answer or someone else, but I really can't.
Yeah, it becomes a challenge. I mean, we can certainly contract with the board through the town manager's office, and certainly contract with them. I'll defer to town council also on the appropriateness and how that the mechanisms work. Typically, you don't see these types of citizen petition articles when it comes to an appropriation. So it makes it a bit challenging, and it's a bit novel for me. So I will try to get the answer.
Well, ultimately, it's for town meeting to decide, and that's what will happen. I'm sure there's someone watching saying, "Steve, you lied to us. You said none of these articles are controversial," and I think Ann alluded to that earlier. Because they are petition articles, the board had to keep them on the warrant. So that's why they're there.
Question. If we're done with Article 14 and 15, I have a question that would like to backtrack to the, are we? Just so I don't step on anyone's toes.
I think we are. Yep.
Okay, great. So regarding the septic improvement loan article, are those loans made by the town guaranteed, e.g. by the state, or is the town at risk of these loans for default? So I think I know the answer, but I would allow town manager to speak.
So no, no, they are not. But the town is not. Essentially, the town is at some risk, but that risk is mitigated. That these loans in the statute and the way it's set up by the Commonwealth become a primary lien against the property, such as a tax title lien. So that what that means is, in the event that the loans aren't repaid, the town can then take the house in lieu of payment. So there is very, very, very little risk to the town. There's always risk in things like this. I mean, you could find something somewhere, but I would say the risk is very, very small in the fact that we have a primary lien on the property.
I have no further questions in front of me, Steve. So if you want to move on to keep moving on.
Well, that's the last article. So I will just wrap it up briefly. And while I'm wrapping it up, if anyone wants to ask a further question about anything other than the articles of procedure, please do so. But I want to thank everyone for participating in this. According to the count I see, there were 31 panelists, which means there were 31 elected, appointed staff from the town of Pembroke who has been on this call to not only listen, but to answer any questions that people may have. And I think there were close to a couple of dozen people, last I looked or heard, that had actually signed on to participate. So I appreciate that. I hope this makes people feel a little bit more comfortable if they cannot attend town meeting. There's one quote that I like, I've used in the past, and it's not original, it's from another moderator. But I think she said, if a preponderance of voters feel that they cannot safely attend a town meeting without unduly risking their own health or the public health, then the legitimacy of the meeting is in question. And I hope that's not the case here. I hope people understand that there's been a lot of planning put into this, even though has been a lot of coverage about it, been a lot of planning about this, and that the business that's absolutely immediate is all it's going to be addressed. We'll be addressing further business at subsequent town meetings, and we try to make this really as safe as possible. I think this went so well. I hope we can do this every single year, whether we have God help us, I hope we're not still in a pandemic, but I think this is a good exercise to go through either in person. Yeah, fingers, toes, everything, cross. And we can do this prior, either virtually or in person, to every town meeting, because it really gives us a chance to get into the weeds of details of town meeting and articles that we don't necessarily have the time to do also. On a regular town meeting. I also want to thank PAC TV. They have been absolutely terrific in putting this together. We had a dry run earlier today, and they have been doing this for other towns, actually doing town meetings for other towns. Also been posed the question, Plymouth is doing a remote town meeting. Why can't Pembroke? Well, that's because Plymouth is a representative town meeting, and the town meeting members are elected. So when you have kind of a limited number of people, you can do it. And in fact, that's one of the things the legislature did this earlier this year, was to allow representative town meetings to have virtual town meetings. But for towns like this, it's an open meeting. First of all, we can't do it. We don't have authority to do it. And second of all, it would be virtually impossible to do. Maybe someday, but not now. So that's why we can't have a virtual town meeting. But PAC TV has been terrific. I want to thank them for helping us put this together. They told us this afternoon that while they're helping towns conduct meetings, we are the only one in the community that they serve, which is a fair number of towns, has actually done this pre-town meeting for information purposes. So I'm kind of proud of that. I want to thank the Board of Selectmen and the town manager and everyone else advisory who's put so much effort into this meeting this evening and the actual town meeting. And again, thanks to Board of Selectmen, PEMA, and the town clerk's office who are making this all possible. And Bill, did you want to add one more thing?
I just want to make sure that everyone understands that it's important that we have more work to do on the budgeting process and more work to do at a future town meeting that are not budget related items. There are a bunch of items out there hanging on that we will be likely addressing at a future town meeting. And let's all hope that this pandemic, we find a path to success to eliminate this. Let's hope that it either goes away or there is a vaccine that is developed relatively quickly that will assist us moving forward. So if you're concerned about a budget item, I would strongly encourage you to contact me and let's talk about it and make sure that it's that is on the priority list, or if it isn't, why we don't have it on the priority list, so you can understand that. So very important facts. And I really nice job, everyone, tonight. I think this is an outstanding thing. I know it helps the residents, and even when you don't have a pandemic, I think it's important that people can ask questions outside of perhaps that town meeting forum.
Question.
Peg Struzik, and while we give Mission Control a chance to unmute Peg,
She should be ready.
I just want to say once again a reminder that although the materials will be available at the town meeting, if you can print out the warrant, the consent agenda online, plus the protocols, if you want to review them, they're all online, they're all there. And I think it would help us out if you could bring them with you and then dispose of them yourself. Town Clerk Peg Struzik.
Hi, Steve. I just want to thank you, Sabrina, and all of PEMA. They've done an amazing job to help set up town meeting. They've taken a lot of work off the clerk's office.
All right. Well, again, thanks to everyone. Without further questions, we'll virtually adjourn this meeting. And for those that feel comfortable coming next week, we hopefully see you there. And once again, thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.